September 18th was day 9 of the Julian Assange extradition hearing. And the first expert witness that we had was Nikki Hager. So he's a investigative journalist, and he was here to testify because he had actually met with WikiLeaks and used a lot of their materials, a lot of their cables for one of his books, probably more than one, but I think the main one is Other People's Wars. So here's his picture. And so he was here to testify. And of course, there was a live thread if you were following. Now, he was talking about redactions, right? This is the hot topic where they're trying to accuse Julian Assange of recklessly publishing unredacted cables. Well, he was involved in the redaction process, okay? Just like John Gutz, the journalist from Der Spiegel, just like John Sabloda from Iraq Body Count. So he's once again somebody who's worked with WikiLeaks and Assange and participated in this redaction process. And he told them that there was an exhaustive, very delicate process undertaken. Not like the prosecution are trying to say, okay? So he also explained that there's a crucial importance in regards to classified information because, a lot of the stuff that's worth writing about and reporting, guess what? It's classified. And it comes from confidential sources as well. And, there's a real need for classified information, especially when you're informing the general public about things like war crimes. Okay? In case that wasn't patently obvious. Nonetheless, he made this point to the court, and also how essential the WikiLeaks cables specifically were for his work, right? In ascertaining the role between New Zealand and the United States, the relationship rather. And so he actually likened the Collateral murder video, which we will discuss in more detail as you'll see in a bit. He likened this video to the reaction from George Floyd's death, right? I mean, after George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis by Derek Chauvin and these 3 other cops, it sparked nationwide protests, right? After people saw the Collateral murder video, likewise, you had the deaths of civilians suddenly being thrust into the public eye. And so there was widespread outrage about this. But moreover, it just clearly showed what's going on here. It's just war crimes. Okay. He asks Nikki, why are you talking about the Collateral murder video? We're not charging Assange for that, right? Again, they're trying to act as if they're not covering up war crimes and they're not prosecuting Assange because he exposed their war crimes. And he told them, well, of course to mention it because the rules of engagement are in the indictment. That's why it's related, okay? So, and you can't just dissect one part of, the slew of documents that WikiLeaks exposed and separate them from the rest. They're all related. The prosecution start asking Nikki if he's ever cracked a password and if he's ever stolen government secrets and whether he's done all of the things that they're accusing Assange of doing, essentially, right? And he told them, well, listen, that's not how journalism works. Throughout the course of your work, you're bound to come across somebody who's breaking the law, okay? And you're going to ask them to maybe do something illegal in the sense that he meant you might need information and there's nothing wrong with soliciting that information, right? He's not the first person to say this in his testimony at the court. So Trevor Tim said the same thing, that he's openly asked for CIA documents on his Twitter. Like, this is normal. It's a daily occurrence. It's a common journalistic practice. And so otherwise you wouldn't find anything worth exposing. You wouldn't find any information worth writing about. So the prosecution then asked him, Lewis asked him, well, would you publish anything that would risk somebody's life? Would you publish their some identifying information that would put them in harm's way? And Nikki said no. And he wanted to elaborate on his answer. And then Lewis just cuts him off, of course. And he said, oh, he already answered the question. Moving forward. So afterwards, they started referring this article that I brought up to you yesterday, where Le Monde, Der Spiegel, The Guardian, they all signed this joint statement condemning WikiLeaks. What they failed to mention is that David Ley is the one who published the password to the WikiLeaks documents. And he says, oh, I thought it was for a temporary password, and I thought I was the only one who had a copy for these files. And garbage, nonsense argument. You know, this guy has been at odds with Julian Assange and WikiLeaks ever since. And so their point about this was that, look, we have all of these news outlets that condemned what happened here. And, you know, what Nikki did is explain to them, well, look, David Ley is not exactly a reliable source. And he would never use anything David Ley says in regards to WikiLeaks. And there's been a lot of animosity between David Ley and Julian Assange. And there was an exhaustive redaction process from the beginning in all domains when it comes to the Afghan war diary, the Iraq war logs, all of it. And then this idiot goes and puts the password in his book. And he forces WikiLeaks' hand because you had essentially people that had access to the unencrypted, unredacted documents. And meanwhile, they're going through all this redaction for no reason. I mean, the prosecution, they were referring to his book. In his book, he writes that Assange allegedly said, these people were collaborators, informants, they deserve to die. And Nikki said that, once again, there's animosity, and you should take everything he says with a pinch of salt. Moreover, the prosecution, they then started asking Nikki if he was able to publish his books. He's written many books without naming sources, without naming names. And he said, yeah, he has been able to do that. But you know what's going on here? What you need to understand with all these questions, this line of questioning, is that, you know, they try to find out what happened during the redaction process. And when everyone's like, well, we did participate and we were there and we undertook a really long and painstaking effort to remove those names. They're not satisfied, the prosecution. So what do? They then say, well, hold on a second. I mean, you are clearly way more responsible. And that's what they tried to do with Daniel Ellsberg, right? Just 2 days ago. They did the same thing, which is insane because at the time when Daniel Ellsberg published the Pentagon Papers, he was a villain. They were going after him, right? Oh, you're a traitor. Oh, you leaked classified information. Oh, you're the devil. And they vilified him for so long. And now they're trying to claim that he's responsible and he's a patriot. And oh, those leaks, they were different because you did it responsibly. You know, you gave some archives to Congress, not everything to the media. And they're doing the same thing here with Nikki. They're trying to say that, oh, no, but you see, you're not like Assange. What you did is more responsible, and you didn't name any source. They're not listening. They're not listening. And then there was also a mention of how many things he redacted. So Nikki told him he went through hundreds of cables, and this took a process of weeks, right? Lewis finishes, and then we have Fitzgerald from the defense. So this was really interesting because this time Fitzgerald is asking him, do you know what Assange is being charged with? Files relating to Gitmo, to Guantanamo Bay, to the Iraq war logs, to the Afghan war diary. Nikki is like, yeah. And that's why I'm confused by what the prosecution is saying, because the prosecution are saying we're only charging him. We're only going after Julian Assange for unredacted cables. Yeah, but the indictment makes no distinction regarding that. And it's not just about that. It's not just about what material. It's the actions as well. So it's not just, oh, Julian Assange published unredacted things. They're also criminalizing the fact he received. Okay? The fact that he received and solicited classified information, which is what all journalists do. There's no difference between publishing and soliciting and receiving information actively or passively. All of these are standard journalistic practices. All journalists do this. And we've heard this from every goddamn witness. Okay? So, you know, in regards to the rules of engagement, they're going after Assange because he published the rules of engagement. And they're acting like this endangered people's lives and U.S. soldiers and all this crap. And the way they're trying to separate this is say that, oh, well, we're not including a Collateral murder video in the indictment where you see the Apache massacre journalists and everything. No. It's not about that. It's not about the war crimes. It's the rules of engagement. Yeah, but the rules of engagement were published to show that you broke your rules of engagement in that video. So you could compare. Oh, look, in this video, we can see war crimes being committed. Why? Because they don't follow the rules of engagement. I mean, me personally, I think the rules of engagement are worthless because you don't need them to know that this was a war crime. I mean, you look at the Hague Convention, the Geneva Convention, international laws, they're very clear about this. You don't need rules of engagement from any specific country to ascertain that those are war crimes. And they don't supersede international law regardless. So it doesn't matter what you write inside of your rules of engagement. I don't care if they're empty or if you write 15,000 pages. They don't supersede the Hague and Geneva Conventions. They just don't. They're not more powerful than that. Okay? Of course, Nikki also, he said that he doesn't believe the fact they published the rules of engagement endangered anyone's lives. This is absurd. It makes no sense. The whole point why the US government says that is because they want to hide their war crimes. That's the only reason. They always use the same excuse. Oh, national security. Oh, this is pertaining to defense. Oh, you're exposing and endangering us. No. Stop changing the goddamn subject. Knowing what the rules of engagement are only allows us to prove that you committed war crimes. That's why they're angry. Because we can look at the rules of engagement and say, oh, look, didn't follow them. They shot first. They opened fire first. There was no threat. Now, when it comes to Khaled al-Masri, so you might remember a few days ago, we talked about Khaled al-Masri because the defense wanted to submit his written statement into the record about him being tortured by the CIA, right? So he was on holiday in Macedonia. He's a German citizen. He was on holiday in Macedonia, and the police kidnapped him and turned him over to the CIA, and then he was tortured, and it's really graphic. So the prosecution, they don't want to accept that they don't want to admit or have it submitted into the record that they tortured this guy, who's, by the way, innocent on top of it. And so they refused and made a whole ruckus out of it the other day. And the defense were like, oh, okay, you know what? We're going to bring the witness. No, we're not going to read his written statement. We're going to bring the witness. So we tried to get him on. There was an interpreter ready and everything, but eventually it didn't happen, unfortunately. So I don't know what's up with that. There were technical difficulties, and he couldn't testify via video link. So the prosecution then and the court, they started arguing or discussing rather, what's the point of having him testify? Like as if that's not blatantly, if it's not painfully obvious why he should be there. But basically the defense, they told the judge that, well, look, we want you to admit, we want you to recognize that the WikiLeaks cables show how the United States was pressuring Germany into not pursuing the CIA. They identified the CIA agents who went after and tortured Khaled al-Masri. And you can also see how the US government pressured Germany not to go after them, right? And the judge was like, I'm not going to accept that. She said she'll read the cables if they want, but she's not going to accept that as a fact. And it's so funny. Every time they hear something they don't like, whether it's the judge or it's the prosecution, they say like, yeah, we'll accept that that's what's written in the statement, but we are not going to accept it as true. What? I mean, this makes no sense. Look at the mental gymnastics, because if you don't recognize what's in the cables as being true, then why the fuck are you prosecuting Julian Assange for leaking cables if everything in the cables is not true? Why would you give a shit if it's all made up, allegedly? Unbelievable. So regardless, what happened is they ended up agreeing, and the defense was able to read the statement to the court, and they explained that, well, rather Al-Masri explained in his statement that the WikiLeaks documents, the publications, were instrumental because they allowed him to take his case to the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg in France, and that was crucial so he could get compensation, but also establish that, yeah, the CIA tortured me. That was proof that it happened, and they held Macedonia accountable for this, and the court ruling said that, you know, Macedonia is accountable, and what happened here is a clear violation of the European Convention. And they, of course, read some of the things that happened to him is very graphic. I mean, I'm warning you, it's quite graphic. This is just one paragraph, by the way, from the court ruling from the European Court of Human Rights. So this is one paragraph, just one, of how they blindfolded him, beat him, sodomized him, everything. I mean, it's horrendous. And they kidnapped him and put him on this plane and just, it's insane. And what's crazy is that even after establishing that he was innocent, they still kept him and still tortured him. Nuts. They also made mention that, of course, he tried to take his complaint to the Eastern District Court of Virginia, no less, which is where all of these whistleblowers and journalists get prosecuted under the Espionage Act, because you know that the jury is going to be made up of CIA employees. So he tried to file it there, no less, and of course they rejected it. Why? Because they deemed the evidence necessary to take the case forward is classified. We can't have that. Unreal. We had a really interesting thing also, from Jennifer Robinson, who is Julian Assange's lawyer. So what she did is she read a statement to the court. This is a former congressman, right? Dana Rohrabacher and Charles Johnson. They visited Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy, right? And they told them in so many words that they have the president's ear and that it would be a win-win situation if Julian Assange would come out and dispel any allegations or rumors that the DNC leak came from Russia. Because, well, I'm not going to get into Russiagate. We already know what that is, right? So we know all about that. And obviously, it would have been very, very beneficial for Trump, politically speaking, to have that dispelled. But Julian Assange refused because he's not going to reveal the name of sources. WikiLeaks has never revealed the name of a source. And he couldn't do it. Even though it would have guaranteed him his freedom. Think about that. Think about that. In the grand scheme of things, compared to war crimes and all these beloved informants that we keep hearing about, that's a trivial case, this DNC leak, honestly. And nonetheless, he still had the integrity not to give up the source, even if it meant having his freedom. Can you imagine? And he's in court right now because he didn't take that. Think about that. And I find it really ironic how they're prosecuting Assange because he allegedly published unredacted leaks, but they wanted him to give the name of a fucking source just so it would be good for Trump. What happened to caring about OPSEC and having some security and precautions in place and not publishing unredacted leaks? I thought you cared so much about that. And now you want Julian Assange to publicly give away the name of a source because it benefits Trump politically? Get out of here. Do you see again the double standard? Some other nonsense that happened today before the lunch break, the entire morning, they actually locked out Kevin Gosztola, who's been covering the hearing. And dude, people were trying to say so in the chat and they were just ignoring them and they wouldn't help him. Like, they were admitting that it's not because of a technical issue and they still just wouldn't let him in. He finally got in the afternoon, but nonetheless, I think that was nonsense what they did. That's not acceptable. And it's just so emblematic of how they don't care and they won't broadcast the trial. Old Bailey is traditionally a public viewing. You have a gallery for the public to come and see what's going on. Can't do that. Okay, let's make some accommodations. There's a pandemic. Nope, they won't do it. And, the morning the hearing resumed, they just revoked access to like 40 different human rights organizations and MPs. This is unacceptable. Unacceptable. We had our second expert witness testifying, and this is none other than Carrie Schenkman, who was testifying yesterday, right? So he came to continue his testimony, and Dobbin, actually, she got some more time to speak with him, right? It didn't go exactly too well for her, but nonetheless, they started debating again about the First Amendment and how much protection this affords someone who leaks classified information or publishes government secrets. And he was like, well, no, that's not how it works. And that's, once again, broad strokes, because the Espionage Act is very broad in its language on purpose. Go figure. And she was trying to say that, well, look, there have been refinements. You've had Supreme Court rulings establishing that the language is not broad. In this case, we were talking about the AIPAC spies yesterday. So Rosen and Weissman. So their charges were dropped, but the Supreme Court ruled that, nope, the language in the Espionage Act is not unconstitutionally vague. So she was citing that as some kind of proof that the Espionage Act does not just paint in broad strokes and go after anyone. And then she was also talking about Morrison and just using these as examples to say that essentially, well, the government acts in good faith all of the time, and the Espionage Act has very clear language, and we only go after very pertinent issues about national security. And he was telling her, yeah, but the language is too broad, and these refinements mean nothing. So what's the point if you're just going to be able to use it against anyone? And most of the time it is used. As he said, it is used against people who are journalists, against anyone. It doesn't even have to be classified information. I mean, just look at Eugene Debs we were talking about yesterday. The guy just gave an anti-war speech. What does that have to do with espionage? There's nothing to do with government secrets, leaking classified information, nothing. And they still use it against them. So that is one example. We have thousands of examples. But to counter the point, which every single expert witness has made up until now, which is that you don't have any examples of journalists being successfully indicted and prosecuted under the Espionage Act. To counter that, the prosecution was saying that, yeah, that may be true, but there's nothing to say that we can't do it. Right? You can't win with them. So Schenkman, he disarmed her beautifully. And he was like, well, listen, man, if you were able to go after journalists and indict them, you would have done it. You can't cite any examples because it's never been viable to do that. There's been no legal basis to go after journalists and successfully prosecute them for that. And again, he explained that the Espionage Act has always been a political tool. And even though you haven't had journalists and media actually prosecuted successfully, it's still used as a tool of intimidation, right? So you can say, oh yeah, the language has been refined. And you had these Supreme Court rulings about how the scope of it is only pertinent to national security. No, it's not, because it's always used unfairly against the media to silence dissent and repress journalism. So yeah, here are the rulings. So I posted the, you can go and sift through them if you'd like. This is the one on Rosen and Weissman, the AIPAC spies, and then this one is on Morrison. And when it comes to the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, she asked him about that, and he said that, well, once again, the language is too broad, and when it comes to unauthorized access, what do you mean by unauthorized access? There's still conversations going on in the Supreme Court about this whole thing, the CFAA. So by design, these things, the Espionage Act, the CFAA, these are all designed to be broad so that you can use them against people who are not journalists by their own admission, right? She's saying that, who are not spies, rather. By her own admission, she's saying we can use this against journalists, essentially. Yeah, it's designed like that. So there you go. Then we had, just very quickly, we had Schenkman being questioned by the defense, right? So Mark Summers just asked him briefly again about soliciting classified information, unauthorized access, right? And he told him again, this is a standard journalistic practice. Everyone does this, as we've heard from multiple witnesses already, okay? And that's it. That's about it. Now, when it comes to the Espionage Act, this was a very hot point of contention, 793, because this section in the Espionage Act is about gathering of classified information and secrets. So in section 793, they criminalize it, right? But nonetheless, it's never been used successfully against a journalist. Why? Because all journalists receive classified information, whether passively or actively. And so that's the point, that were this case with Assange to go ahead, were he to actually be convicted, it would have extreme grave ramifications for journalists, because all journalists, you know, they receive classified info or they solicit it. Do you understand? They're using stuff that's meant for people who are spies on journalists, and they're just like openly saying it, like, hey, we can do this. There's no previous ruling that says we can't. Okay, but that doesn't mean you should. So afterwards, that was the end of Schenkman's testimony. And afterwards we had Dean Yates. So he was the bureau chief for Reuters in Baghdad. So he wasn't there, but the defense read his statement to the court. And man, it's heartbreaking. It really is. So he explains in the statement how when he was in Baghdad in July 2007 and this collateral murder took place, right? So they killed like 20 plus Iraqi civilians, and then there were 2 children that were wounded, and among them were 2 of his staff, right? 2 Reuters photographers. And at the time, what Dean Yates did is he went and talked to the U.S. Army there, and he went and met with generals, and they walked him through what happened. He tried to get their cameras from his colleagues that were killed. They wouldn't give them to him for like a couple of weeks. And they lied to him. You know, they showed him the collateral murder video, but only the first 3 minutes. They lied to him. And they made it seem as though his colleagues were to blame because they were acting suspicious or something, which is completely wrong, because actually Julian Assange later on, when the video came out, explains that the order to shoot was already given. But nonetheless, they lied to him, and they made it seem as though there was a battle with insurgents. There were no insurgents. And when he showed him the video, you don't hear in the first couple of minutes the laughing, the joking, like they're playing a video game. You don't see them killing the people who came to rescue his colleagues and the kids. You don't see that in the first 3 minutes. That's why they didn't show it to him. And what Dean Yates also talked about was that he tried to get the full video. He knew that they were not showing him the full thing, and he asked for the full video. They wouldn't give it to him, and so he had to go through Reuters and do a Freedom of Information Act request, and it got denied. And keep in mind, this is 2007, so the collateral murder video comes out 3 years later in 2010, and then he saw the full picture. And he knew they had lied to him, right? And he talked about how much anguish this caused him, understandably, and mental distress, and yeah, it's terrible. It's really heartbreaking. And this is one of the points from his witness statement. He said, "I know Namir and Said would have remained forgotten statistics in a war that killed countless human beings, possibly hundreds of thousands of civilians, had it not been for Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange. The truth of what happened to Namir and Said, the truth of what happened on that street in Baghdad on July 12th, 2007, would not have been brought to the world. What Assange did was 100% an act of truth-telling, exposing to the world what the war in Iraq in fact was and how the US military behaved and lied. The video was picked up by thousands of news organizations worldwide, sparking global outrage and condemnation of US military tactics in Iraq." Really very powerful statement. So I'm glad that they entered that into the record, because the U.S. prosecution, they're making it their duty, of course, to try and block any kind of mention of war crimes and make the entire trial about unredacted leaks and cyber crimes, while ignoring the real victims. These are the real victims, okay? These are the people who got killed. These are the people who suffered. So that was basically it for today, right? So unfortunately, we didn't get to hear Khaled al-Masri directly, but nonetheless, I'm glad we get to read a statement at least. The fact they tried to block it the other day is disgusting. I mean, this guy's a torture victim of the fucking CIA. They tortured him. Kidnapped him for no reason. He's fucking innocent. And you're looking at Dean Yates' statement. I mean, he's not the one who got killed in that attack, but I mean, do we really have to debate this? I mean, look how he's been impacted by this. To this day, as he said in his statement, it's traumatizing. So that was essentially it for day 9. And if I may say so, I'm really exhausted. I mean, I haven't been getting enough sleep covering this goddamn thing, and I'm not complaining, but yeah, it's good that there's a weekend or like a 2-day break or something until the court resumes on Monday. But so this is supposed to go until the 24th, right? And I think this is going to be decided by appeals, to be honest, just like it was with Abu Qatada and most people who are facing extradition hearings. It's usually always decided with appeals. In the UK or the European Court of Human Rights, it depends. But, you know, one thing I found interesting, another double standard is like they didn't want to admit that Khaled al-Masri has been tortured. Hold on a second, man. It's not a question of what you want to admit or what you want to accept into the record. That was a decision by the European Court of Human Rights. And EU law technically supersedes a member state's laws, which is how extradition was blocked for Abu Qatada, for example, and how extradition was okayed in the case of Babar Ahmad, one of Eric Lewis's clients, right? So the court decision and the court ruling and the evidence that's in that ruling in the case of Khaled al-Masri is 100% valid. It's not up for debate. So I don't understand what's going on with that. But anyway, I just wanted to bring you up to speed on what happened today. I hope that was informative. If this was informative and you enjoyed the coverage, please consider supporting the show. You can do so on Venmo, CashApp, PayPal. Any donation would be really appreciated. That's how we keep independent media going. And moreover, if you'd like, you can also support on Patreon, which is useful because you get a notification when we go live, when YouTube does not inform you because they want to censor independent media. So that's definitely worth it. And you can do whatever you like, man. It's a monthly contribution, but you can do whatever you want as much as you want, okay? And we really, really appreciate it. So I see we got 157 people watching, but only 101 likes. I need you to smash the like button. It helps with the algorithm, okay? So thank you for that. And we got a super chat over here from Dan. Thank you, Dan. It says, if Jesse Ventura debates Trump on Rogan, I bet he'll bring it up. Hashtag President Ventura is happening. Join us. We need electors in Cali ASAP. So yeah, Jesse Ventura, I mean, he's legit. He just did an episode a couple of days ago regarding Snowden. And yeah, he hasn't shied away from this issue. He definitely bring it up. But it's crazy how when it comes to Trump pardoning Assange, they denied that this was even a possibility a few months ago, back in February, if I recall. And yeah, no, that happened. They offered it to him. So think about that. It's crazy. And Julian Assange said, no, he's not going to reveal the name of the sources. So you tell me something. If Julian Assange is a reckless journalist, as they say in the prosecution, if he is so callous and he publishes everything, why didn't he give up the source of the DNC leaks in exchange for his freedom? You tell me. You answer that question. Think about it. That's his fucking freedom, man. He wouldn't have to deal with any of this garbage right now if he had taken that deal. And he didn't do it. If that doesn't show you, if that does not indicate integrity, I don't know what does. I mean, how many people would say no to that? Would you say no to that? Be honest with yourself. You're stuck in Belmarsh prison or inside the Ecuadorian embassy. You might be extradited from one day to the next to ADX Florence or Alexandria Detention Center and put in some supermax. That's a very cheap deal for your freedom, if we're being honest. It's a very cheap deal, very easy one to take, and he didn't do it. Anthony, thank you for the banana sticker. I really appreciate it. I'm just making sure that I didn't forget anything. Hey, we got a couple of super chats over here. We got one from Ace. Thank you very much, Ace. I really appreciate it. It says thank you for what you're doing. Very few real no-nonsense journalists left. Thank you. Thank you. That's much appreciated. And we got another one from Glory. Glory says, Carrie Schenkman is a bad man, but also big up anyone helping with and covering this case, including you, Base Richard the Lionheart. So give yourself a pat on the back. This case is so much. Yeah, I mean, I hope I was able to condense it adequately because there's so much crap happening. You really need to faut s'accrocher, as they say in French, right? Faut s'accrocher. You got to stay locked in. Yeah, I hope that was informative. Thank you, Glory. Thank you to Ace. Thank you to everyone for the support. I really appreciate it. So with that said, I'm going to end the stream here so that it's one little episode and everything is in order. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And before I leave, I implore you to support the show on Patreon if you can. Patreon.com/PapiChuloman. And please sign up for the newsletter. The newsletter is contingency. You feel me? Because we need to have a backup, not just with Rockfin, but also with a newsletter. Make sure we don't put everything in one basket. So definitely sign up for that, and I'll put the link for you right here. Just takes 1 second, but it'll help us give you live notifications and everything. All right, there you go. So I'm putting all the links in the live chat, and I really appreciate all your support. It means everything. We also got a donation from Mona. There's no note attached. I don't know if that's a code, but there's no note attached. Mona, thank you so much. And I'm going to drop the links for you here. And we'll see you on Monday, if not before. But the Assange trial resumes on Monday. So be well, and thank you so much for tuning in. All right.